This is episode 33 of the 99 Forever podcast. I'm Eric Friesen, and I've got two of my favorite guests on the show tonight to preview the Edmonton Oilers' first round series against the Winnipeg Jets, the host of the Oilerslive podcast, the Heavy Hockey podcast, and the Oilers Empire live stream, Michael Hebert, and Megathread Mike Dirsa. Guys, how are you doing tonight?
Doing well.
Living the dream.
I've got like too many things to host now. I realize
I could barely fit all your titles in the intro.
I gotta shorten the bio up here a little bit.
Yeah. Starting to become like Iron Mike Tyson with all the different nicknames.
Right. Yeah. 3 podcasts you've never listened to.
Well, I'm sure everyone listening to this podcast has also listened to those ones. But yeah, it's an exciting time, guys. I mean, playoff hockey's around the corner. How's the weather where you are? It was plus 32 in Saskatoon today.
32?
Yep.
Oh, we had 22 in Halifax today.
Oh, that's not too bad still.
Yeah.
Mike, what was it like out in Grand Prairie?
Yeah, you're depressing me. Well, yesterday was about 18. Today was, I think, about 14 and a little rainy.
Yeah, we've got some pretty wild weather changes here. It can be anything from minus 50 in January to last summer. I think we hit plus 37 one day. So I don't know if there's any place in the world. There might be somewhere, but it has that big of a shift in 6 months.
I know. I mean, I lived in Saskatoon for quite a while, so I remember all about that. There's been some craziness, right?
Extreme heat and extreme cold.
Yeah. Yeah, you got everything.
Well, guys, the Oilers wrapped up their regular season on Saturday, and we're now just over 48 hours away from puck drop on Game 1 between the Oilers and Jets at Rogers Place. But before we make our predictions for this series, I just want to get your thoughts on the history between these two clubs. And although the Oilers aren't facing the original Jets franchise, the rivalry goes back all the way to the WHA and continued after Edmonton and Winnipeg both joined the NHL in 1979. However, I'm unfortunately a little too young to remember those playoff battles between the Oilers and Jets during the 1980s and early 90s. So with you guys being a few years older than me, I'll just ask you, what memories do you have of the Oilers and Jets facing each other in the postseason? Michael, why don't you kick things off?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Mike can piggyback off of all the bright stuff that I say. To be fair, I don't have a ton of memories of it. I mean, it was pretty young. I do remember it, obviously, but I don't have a lot of specifics. Some of the things that I do remember, I mean, Calgary fans obviously, have always been proud of their sea of red, but I think the Jets, like in Winnipeg, they started the whiteout. Like it was, I remember watching those games on TV when Edmonton would go into Winnipeg, and it would just be crazy, right? Like the fans really got behind it. Those were there were a lot of lopsided victories when it came to wins, but I'm not sure there were a lot of lopsided wins, right? If you're following where I'm going, they weren't easy series. It wasn't an easy series. I don't think the Oilers ever walked into a series against the Jets thinking this is going to be a gimme. And that's what I remember. I remember the Jets had great teams and to some extent, I kind of felt bad for Jets fans, because they were there. I think it was probably more of a rivalry for Winnipeg than it was for Edmonton. I mean, it just seemed in those years that Edmonton was unstoppable, right? And so, it was Edmonton versus the world rather than Edmonton versus Winnipeg. But they were, everybody got around it, and I do admire the Winnipeg fans for the level they came out and supported their team.
And Mike, what memories come to mind for you?
I think the biggest thing, and Michael touched on it there a little bit, is the whiteout. I mean, that's the part that seems sort of ingrained in my memory. And Winnipeg having a building that didn't, not like the Bell Center in Montreal, there wasn't 24,000 people ever at a Jets game, but those 15, 16,000 people that they would get out sure made a lot of noise. And I guess that's probably one of the things that's, a little bit depressing about this playoff and last year's is fans not being in the buildings in Canada. But those were high octane series, and I don't think the Oilers ever overlooked the Jets, but they got pushed by them, but, seemed to usually find a way. And, if they were going to the Stanley Cup, they had to get through Winnipeg to get there. So there was some series where they got challenged, and those 80s Oilers teams weren't fair though. They were loaded with talent, and a lot of times back then the two best teams in the NHL came out of Alberta almost for 10 years straight. So yeah, I have memories of them. They're not as vivid, as the Oilers Flames series, because the physicality I don't think was quite as intense in those series, but it was definitely good hockey.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there was a lot of talent on those Winnipeg teams, but as you both kind of mentioned, the 80s Oilers are arguably the greatest team ever constructed in history of the game. So for even a talented Winnipeg team that had a bunch of 30-goal scorers and finished top 10 in the league several times, to run into this dynasty, and like you said, they couldn't get to the Stanley Cup final without going through Edmonton and Calgary, and they did actually beat Calgary in the playoffs 2 times, the only 2 playoff series the original Jets ever won. But the Oilers ultimately just completely took it over. They're 6-0 all time against the Jets in the playoffs, and I'm sure we're hoping that trend is going to continue this year as well. And the Oilers beat the Jets en route to all 5 of their Stanley Cup championships. So there's a lot of history between these clubs, and for the first time since 1990, we're going to see this rivalry renewed.
Yeah, I think that, and you brought up the 30-goal scorers. I was not aware of that stat until Eric and I were on a pod with Jet Centric and talking, a little bit of Jets and Oilers history and about the upcoming series. And they had 6 30-goal scorers in that 84-85 season, which is pretty impressive. You got to go down to the 7th spot. And in their 7th spot from a points perspective was Dave Babbage. And that's not too bad, right? Babbage was a hell of a player. He had 62 points on D that year. But Howard-Chuck was amazing. Those teams were amazing. It just shows you just how good the Oilers teams were back then. Unbelievable.
And not to take anything away from the Jets in 84-85, but we remember back in 2017, the 84-85 Oilers were voted the greatest team of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And that 85 Oilers team had 5 30-goal scorers, 1 less than the Jets. However, Mark Messier did miss, I believe, 27 games that season. So if he would have played, he would have likely been the Oilers' 6th 30-goal scorer, and they would have tied the Jets for that record that year. However, the Oilers had 2 70-goal scorers.
That's ridiculous, isn't it? Yeah.
Wayne Gretzky had 73 that year to lead the league, and Jari Kurri finished second with 71 goals. So, we might see a 70-goal scorer again in the NHL someday, but I will bet that we will never see 2 70-goal scorers again on the same team in the same year.
No.
Real long shot bet there, Eric.
yeah. That's
well. I mean, the way McDavid and Draisaitl were playing this year, who can count it out, right?
I'm just looking at the stats from that year. You know how many games Jari Kurri took to score 71 goals? 73 games.
Yeah, just
almost
insane,
a goal a game over 70 games. Like, that is ridiculous.
And when you have the greatest playmaker of all time feeding you the puck, that definitely helps too.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Yeah. Oh man. Well, let's let's bask in that glory for a little bit, but
for a little while longer. And hopefully
Yeah.
we're going to have a new playoff victory over the Jets to talk about very soon. So looking at the results from the regular season now, the Oilers finished in second place in the North Division this year with 72 points, 9 points ahead of the Jets, who finished in third place. The Oilers also went 7-2-0 against the Jets, including 6 straight wins, and Edmonton outscored Winnipeg 34-22 in those 9 games. So clearly the Oilers were the better team overall and head-to-head versus the Jets. But how much stock do you put into the regular season dominance? Do you think that that is going to carry over into the playoffs? Mike, go ahead.
Well, it's a brand new season starting Wednesday. And I think it's a clean slate for both teams. So I don't put a lot into what happened during the regular season other than that gets into your mind a little bit, into your psyche, thinking that, oh, we're going to have trouble because we had trouble with these guys this season when it comes to Winnipeg. But, I think the Oilers are a little bit more mature now in their mindset. It would have been very easy to drop one of those games that they played against Ottawa this year, and they didn't. So I don't see them taking Winnipeg lightly. I think they'll have the right approach, and as long as they come in with that same attitude, I think they'll be just fine. And I think it's a little arrogant to say they'll be over in 5 games, but I think Edmonton will get by in 6.
And Michael?
Yeah, I'm with Mike on the 6-game thing. It's not. We've talked about this time and again. I think you got to be wary of how a guy like Halibut can come in and potentially just be lights out. You see, goalies do it all the time come playoffs, and but this. I think this Oilers team is different from 2017. I think it's different from last year. I think these guys have some confidence and some maturity. And I think some of the guys that, we've been getting down on in the bottom 6 and maybe, anybody outside of Draisaitl and McDavid, right, in terms of forwards. Obviously, our defense with Barry and Nurse have really stepped up. But I think that they'll. I think this is a different team. I think once the energy starts, I think they see it around the city. I mean, I can hear the Oilers chants from Halifax, and it's pretty it's pretty fantastic, right? Like, just to know, I wish I was there because I remember what it was like in 2006. But I think the Oilers in 6.
No, that's a good call too. I was going to even ask you later in the podcast, but now I know your prediction already. Yeah, the way I look at it is a new season. I agree with what Dirsa said, but honestly, the fact that they have the confidence that comes with beating that team 6 straight times, I think that still does carry some weight as we move into the postseason. And just the way that the Oilers have been playing the last half of the season, the way that they've really elevated their game. And you look at the Jets, they really struggled losing 7 straight, and I think they went 2-9 over an 11-game stretch. However, they did turn it around with a few wins late in the season, so you wonder if they've started to get their mojo back a little bit. Overall, though, I still think that the Oilers are the better club, and you're right. Some people are predicting that this is going to be too easy of a series. I think the Jets are going to play them very hard, and they should be able to win at least a game or 2. But I'm still going to say that the Oilers will be the better team and hopefully come out on top in this series. All right, I want to get your thoughts now on what specific areas you think that either team has the clear-cut advantage heading into this playoff round. And since it's an Oilers podcast, let's start with the orange and blue. Michael, where do you give the Oilers the edge over the Jets?
Well, it's got to be top end scoring 100%. Forward depth is definitely an advantage for the Oilers. I think in terms of defensive, offensive capability from the defense, that's an advantage. But I think on the other side, it's defensively, I think the Jets can put it together a little bit more than the Oilers. I might be wrong about that, but that's it. they've got a good decor if they're all playing well, and they haven't been doing that this year. I think not to the same level that you'd expect from them, but definitely our advantage is on the forward scoring. Those top two guys, obviously, you don't need to say who they are. The other, here's the thing that I would say as well. I'm going to give right now, based on the regular season, the advantage to Smith over Hellebuck. And if I had said that early in the season, you guys would have laughed me off the pod. But right now, I think Smith is he's got a resurgence, and we've seen him we've seen him play in the playoffs before, and he can come up with some really big games. I expect a lot from him.
And Mike, what areas do you think the Oilers are superior to the Jets?
Well, I mean, not to state the obvious, but we've got the high-end game breakers that can change a game. And Winnipeg's challenge is going to be trying to nullify that and, rely on their third, fourth lines to outplay our third, fourth lines, which some people think is definitely something they're capable of. I think our decor is superior to Winnipeg's decor. And, if the season play is indicative of the playoffs, yeah, I would agree with Michael. Mike Smith this year head-to-head has outplayed Connor Hellebuck. That could all change Wednesday night, though. Your confidence and everything that you've built up during the regular season can go out the window immediately if you drop game one. So not to be captain obvious or nothing, but I think game one's a big game. If you win that, then you've got Winnipeg thinking about all the times they lost all season. If Winnipeg wins that, that's thrown out the window. So I'm looking forward to Wednesday night.
Yeah, for sure. And they always say you're never really in trouble in a playoff series until you lose at home. So the pressure will be on Edmonton to get those first two wins at Rogers Place. And then if you can steal at least one in Winnipeg, you should be in pretty good shape the rest of the way. The way I see it, just to, like you said, piggyback off what both of you guys said, our high-end players are better than their high-end players. You could make an argument that the Jets' top 12 forward group is better than the Oilers' 12-man group. And I mean, that's probably going to be something that we have to pay attention to, because if the top two lines do cancel each other out, then Winnipeg's third or fourth line could be the difference in this series from what I can see. It's just going to be a matter of, are McDavid and Draisaitl going to be able to still have the same level of dominance or close to that level as they get into even tougher games where, defense is tighter and there's even more systems played than there is during the regular season. Power plays aren't as likely to be coming their way. I mean, we don't get many in the first place, but in the playoffs, just maybe one out of every 5-6 calls might actually result in a power play. So I'm not expecting the Oilers to get a ton, but when they do get on the power play, number 29 and 97 have to make it count. And other than that, I look at the defense. I think the Oilers defense is better than the Jets. Right now, Darnell Nurse and Tyson Barrie, I would say, are better than any defenders on the Winnipeg squad. Adam Larson, an excellent shutdown guy. If Ethan Bear can step up and if Kulikov plays a solid game and doesn't have any bonehead mistakes or anything, I think that this decor is actually going to be the far better one in this series. And that could be a huge thing too, especially with Mike Smith. That's the one thing where you said that Mike Smith might have the edge over Hellebuck in this season for sure, but I think we still have to give respect to the defending Vezina Trophy winning goalie. He could be a tough guy to beat, especially at this time of year. Even though McDavid and Draisaitl did have a good amount of success against him this year, it's still gonna, anything can change once the playoff turn. And like you said, it is a new season.
Yeah, I'll keep going back to that. I 100% agree. You can't, and I think that's the good thing, right? For the Oilers is there's no denying that Hellebuck has it in him to steal a game, to maybe even a series, right? And so I think the Oilers, are going to be fully aware of that and play against that.
Yeah, I fully expect Hellebuck to win, steal them at least one game in this series.
Yeah. I think actually the big question I have, and if you watched like that Scheifele line, just like was bleeding points, like, or goals against, right? And and if they that could be, the difference in the series, right? As if they don't come around defensively, or if they're going head to head,
I don't think
especially
they
in the
want to
home,
go head to head.
yeah.
That
But
would
when
be
they're at home, when the Oilers are at home, right? Like if you get the
Yeah.
right line changes, I think I think it's trouble for Winnipeg if they can't get it together. Like it'll be over maybe even quicker than 6, but I don't expect those guys are competitors, right? Like they'll, I suspect they'll come around and be better come playoff hockey. If there's any indication from the games we've seen, the playoffs have been outstanding so far. I expect this one to be just as hard as all of the other games.
Definitely. All right, well, let's just continue talking about the dynamic duo now, since it's the most fun thing to talk about in oil country lately. And so McDavid and Draisaitl, we know, are undoubtedly the two best players in this series, and they absolutely dominated the Jets all season long. McDavid recorded 22 points in 9 games against Winnipeg and had multiple points in every game. Meanwhile, Draisaitl had 12 points in 9 games, including 3 game-winning goals. I just want to get a prediction from you guys. How many points for McDavid and Draisaitl each in this series? Michael, why don't you go first?
Oh, each. Yeah, that's a tough one. I can't not think, given the tear that McDavid was on, I figure he's got to get 12 or 13 points out of this series. And Draisaitl, maybe not quite that many, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's at 9. So let's say 13, lucky 13 for McDavid and 9 points for Draisaitl.
And
Which
Mike,
those are huge, right? Like those are huge numbers. Yeah. But
even if the series goes 7 games, it's you're still pretty much predicting 2 points a game for McDavid.
Which is ridiculous in playoff hockey, but I think he can do it.
And Mike, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a dozen for Connor and 8 for Leon.
Okay, I've got 11 for McDavid and 8 for Draisaitl, and I might be a little low here. Now you guys are making me rethink that I should have went higher. But the way McDavid's been playing the last month, I mean, he was averaging 3 points a game for a stretch there. So if he ends up just going off and taking his game to a whole new level in the playoffs, as great of a regular season as he had, we might see an even better version of McDavid in a week.
Yeah, 2 points like a game seems a little low, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Is this a good time to point out that I called over 100 points at the beginning of the season?
Yeah, exactly. Did you call 105 exactly?
I didn't call 105,
okay.
But I did call 100 points.
Yeah, I said 92 on an episode, I think, with Shane Sander back in December. And looking back now, it felt low at the time, and it's proved to be right because he beat that by 13 points.
Look, you know what? I mean, I'm not even sure what I was. I don't drink, but I think I might have been drinking that day. Like, to honestly predict over 100 points in a 56 game season, given, recent history, is unbelievable. The fact that he did it is even more unbelievable.
The highest scoring rate by any player since Mario Lemieux in 1995-96.
Yeah.
Just to put into context of how dominant of a season McDavid had. All right, sticking with those two, there's always plenty of debate among Oiler fans on Twitter if they should be playing together or on separate lines. However, they were each centering their own line earlier today at practice. But going into the playoffs, would you like to see them stay together and force the Jets to try and shut down the 2 highest scoring players in the league? Or would you rather keep them apart and hopefully create an easier matchup for the Draisaitl line? Because it's almost a certainty that Winnipeg's top defenders will be playing against McDavid. Mike, what do you think?
As much as I love seeing them together, I think it's like Pippen and Jordan. But I don't know. I think you use that as a kind of a last resort and not first resort. So I like them apart. I really think, if you ran Connor, Leon, and now Ryan McLeod, and Juju Arcera as your centers, that's probably the way I would play it.
And Michael, what do you got?
Yeah, I totally agree on that. I think Mike hit it correct. I'd love to see the two of them play together. I always do. But when I look back, when I think about 2017, like Draisaitl will step it up to a level that we haven't seen him play yet this year, right? Because he's got a bit of a nasty streak in him when he gets really competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And that plays well in the playoffs, right? Like, the fact that I can't remember who he nutted in San Jose. I was at that game, but you'll remember, like,
yeah,
he did that. I mean, that's just the nastiness that comes out for, Leon Draisaitl. And he was outstanding that playoffs, I thought. In fact, I felt like he played a little bit better than McDavid.
He led them in scoring that year.
Yeah. Other than McDavid, when he shows off his skill, it just blows you away. But I love the idea of separating them. I think they're both going to elevate their game to levels we haven't seen yet, if that's even possible. And you're going to see two guys that are on a mission this year. I'm actually really excited. I think we could have made some different trades at the deadline for sure. They weren't available, whatever. But I think these guys, I'm the fan in me is getting too big, but I think honestly, I think we're going to see something we've not seen in a long time in oil country. I'm excited. For sure. And they should be on separate lines. They'll play enough on the power play together.
That's right. I mean, look, we know how much they're able to, take over games with their power play dominance, but they don't really need to be playing together at 5-on-5 all the time. If you want to put them together against one of the weaker teams in the division where you can beat up on them and rack up a ton of points, that's fine. But once we're getting into the playoffs against tougher opponents, I just think that you're reducing the talent of the rest of your roster if you have these two Art Ross trophy winning players on the same unit. It makes life so much more difficult on the opposition if you can send them over the board wave after wave. And I mean, we all know McDavid can have success with anybody. And I think that he actually did look pretty good with Dominic Cahoon and Jesse Puljujarvi. I like that line. And if they can rekindle the success of the Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins, Yamamoto line, that could be the real game changer in this series. We haven't seen it put together on a consistent basis in over a year, but for those few months that they were together late last season, they really turned the tide on the Oilers season and were basically good for a goal a game. So I'm hoping that line is able to kind of get back to where they were late in the 2019-20 season and hopefully play a huge part in the Oilers winning this series.
But talking about that line, Eric, I think this is one of the first little stretches that they've had any type of practice time together.
Right.
So I'm hopeful that they come out of that and they rekindle some of that, exactly how you said. Everybody loved that line. We were all screaming for it all season, and I do expect good things from it. And as I said, I do expect Draisaitl to just be on a whole different level.
And it's also a great chance for Nugent Hopkins and Yamamoto to kind of both break out offensively. I don't think either one had as productive of a year as they would have hoped for. So, getting to play with a guy who finished second in the league in points and, who's such a dual threat, he's equally as good of a passer as he is a shooter. Putting that guy between two highly skilled players, the potential is there for them to absolutely break out. And I just think that as much as we talked about, as much as the McDavid line is going to get it done, and we all think he's going to get over 10 points in this series, reach double digits. That Draisaitl line, I mean, Leon could get over double digits as well if his line mates are finishing chances and they're creating offense. Because I love the way that line cycled the puck when they were at their best.
Let me ask you guys something. Like in 2017, did we have anywhere near the capability to break out of our zone that we do this year? like right from goalie outwards, right?
No.
No.
I mean, Mike Smith is like a third defenseman in his own right, the way he's able to send the puck up the ice. And
We've got minimum
got
three
Tyson
guys
Barrie.
that can take the puck out of the zone, get it out of there
Yeah.
better than we had in 2017. And 4 guys if you include Smith, right? Like that in itself is a whole different world for us.
Plus, all these players are 4 years older now, not just more skilled, but bigger, stronger, more experienced. I just think overall, there's no question that the 2021 edition of the Oilers is stronger than the 2017 one was.
You guys think we're underrated or overrated going in?
I think that most people have the Oilers beating the Jets, so I wouldn't say that they are underrated in that sense, but I would say that not many experts are predicting them to go on a long playoff run.
What's your thought, Mike?
Yeah, no, guaranteed we're losing to Toronto, right?
The mainstream media will have you believe that. I mean, it's like, look, I can admit that the Leafs are a little bit of a better team at this point, but I don't think they're significantly better. If you look at the stats this year, it's not like they were miles ahead of where the Oilers are at.
They had our way with us, that little mini series there.
For the three games back in February. But then
and
once the series shifted back to Toronto, the Oilers played them pretty well.
yeah, and you know what? I think them matching up against Montreal is in our favor. We have to do our homework against Winnipeg and not get past that, but I think Montreal is going to play a similar style to what we saw with the Florida Tampa Bay game last night.
Yeah, hey, I'd be worried about Montreal if I was a Leafs fan.
Mm-hmm.
With Weber back and Galchenyuk, and they're a big team. Like the couple games they played against Edmonton, I looked at them and said, this is a playoff team. Like they are not going to be, you can't take them lightly.
Toronto might win the series and lose all at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I just want to move on to the next topic now. And, every spring there seems to be a player who outperforms their regular season totals in the playoffs and sort of becomes this unexpected hero. And I think the most famous example in oil country over the past 2 decades would be Fernando Pisani in 2006. You even look at Zach Cassian. I think he filled that role somewhat in 2017. So outside of the Oilers' top players, who could you see step up and become a playoff hero this year? Michael, who's your pick?
Oh, playoff hero this year outside of the top guys. Yeah, I think Neil has a shot at it. I think he's been playing well as of late, and yeah, I think Neil has a shot of making a big difference on this team. Going through the playoffs, and he's just got the right level of nastiness to do it too. If he can dig deep and find it.
Mike, what do you got? Who do you envision being this year's version of Pisani for the Oilers?
Well, Neil's line mate on the other side might be a sleeper guy to watch and chase on, but I'm interested to see this big giant Finn kid, his first NHL playoffs. I think he's gonna, tomorrow night he's gonna have a hard time sleeping. He's gonna be like that little kid at Christmas, and that big smiling, shit-eating Esa Tikkanen grin that he dons all the time. I want to see what he can do in the playoffs. He's gonna be my sleeper pick, and not really a sleeper pick because he's had a pretty good season, but I'm interested to see Yessi in the playoffs licking his chops, and yeah, I think that'll be a lot of fun for him. So he's my guy.
Oh man, I would love if Jesse just absolutely took off and was a big producer for the Oilers this spring, and he's going to get the chance. I mean, he's playing on the top line with the best player in the world. Would any of you guys be surprised if he ended up with 2 or 3 goals in this series?
No, not at all. In fact, I don't even really. Now that he's on McDavid's line, I'm not really thinking of him so much as a sleeper anymore. Like I think guys know that he's, he can bring it, and he's such a big kid. Like How many guys have you seen go down that just, then it's the way he skates with this big smile on his face. You don't see it coming. I would hate to play against the guy. Like, I'm not even sure he knows, right? Like, I'm not even sure he knows how big he is. What was that comment he said earlier in the season? Just stick my butt out.
Stick my big butt.
Man, I love Puljujärvi. Love him.
His English has come a long way, and he's quite funny in interviews too. I really like this kid. I mean, how can you not? His expressions during the game, he just always is smiling on the bench. Man, he's an easy kid to cheer for.
Sure is.
For me, I wouldn't be surprised if his first NHL hat trick came in a playoff game.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now that's a big call.
Well, you know what? The last little bit there, he's figured out that he really can shoot the puck.
Yeah, he's got a sneaky shot, right? Like, it doesn't look like it's going to come at the goalie that fast.
Is anyone thinking about that 2-on-1, the game when McDavid got his 100th point and he fed Jesse and he just absolutely roofed it under the bar?
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple guys who I think could end up being a playoff hero. I wonder if a guy like Josh Archibald even steps up. He's got good speed. He battles so hard every shift. He hits hard for a little guy. And I just think there's some underrated offensive skills there too. I could just see someone like him stepping up. He probably might be the closest thing to Pisani, actually, if you look at our current roster. And also James Neal, I mean, a guy with over 100 games of NHL experience in the playoffs. That's the kind of guy who you can lean on for advice in this series. And he's not playing as important of a role as he was when he was in his prime, but there's still some offense. He's still got some gas left in the tank. And I think we even saw that in the bubble last summer, where he was a really solid big presence for the Oilers in the corners and digging pucks out. And I wonder if he ends up being a guy who buries a couple goals in front of the net and ends up being one of the key players for the Oilers in this series.
If he gets any power play time or he starts to get hot, right?
Chason's going to have that chance too. Like, I think those guys will almost trade in and out. We've seen it
absolutely
for the last year, and there's still a lot of people who would like to see Jesse in that spot too. And that would also get the Oilers an extra right-hand shot on the power play. But it's nice to know that they have three different options who can kind of play that net front role.
Yeah.
And let's move on now to our series predictions. I mean, Michael, you kind of already gave us yours, saying that the Oilers were going to win in 6 games. And I'll skip ahead to Mike Dirsa now. Like, well, who are you taking, and how many games do you think it takes to get it done?
Well, I started that whole
thing. Yeah, he gave it away early.
Yeah, I said Edmonton in 6. I guess the question in my head, I think Winnipeg's probably learned throughout this season, the regular season, that if they try to go head to head with Edmonton and play a north-south kind of game, that doesn't bode too well for them. So I think we're going to see a little bit more trapping and passive game from them. And that's why I think it'll probably extend to 6 games, because Hellebuyck has the capability to steal a game or keep Winnipeg in games that they have no business being in. So I think it'll go 6. If it goes shorter, great. But I'm looking forward to Wednesday night. I think that's a really monumental game. My dad always used to tell me, you win the odd games in a series, you win the series. So I hope we take game 1.
Definitely. So I think we're all sort of on the same page that the Oilers are going to walk away with a 4-2 series victory. You did make me think of something there when you were just talking about Hellebuyck in the goaltending battle. We did sort of discuss this a little earlier on, but I'm just curious, when we get to the back-to-back games for game 3 and game 4, how comfortable would either of you guys be with Mike Smith playing both those games? Or would you expect that we'll see Koskinen in one of those games? Because from my perspective, the way that Koskinen's playing right now, I don't have a lot of trust in him. And I've been a Koskinen supporter over time, but just lately, I don't think the Oilers can put him in there. If you can try and wrap the series up early, maybe Mike Smith gets some rest there. Or do you think that it's too risky to have a 39-year-old goaltender playing back-to-back nights? Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I've been struggling with this myself. I think, it's going to be Tippett calling up Smitty and asking him what he thinks, right? And I'd be surprised if he makes the decision even before those two back-to-back games. Like I think it'll be, he'll see what kind of work he's had, anything like that. You've got to be, you've got to have it in the back of your head that Koskinen hasn't been playing well, and so there's going to be some fear there. But at the same time, that's the kind of thing that can, a team can rally behind, right? Like a goalie that's not, having some struggles, and the team's got to, that's how championships are won, right? You get behind a team and they're behind a player and just help them out and help them get through that struggle. Playoffs are different too, right? We've seen goaltenders that have come in that didn't have great seasons, and that's when they become stars, right? I'm not saying Koskinen's that guy, but I do think anyway. I mean, long and short is I think that's a conversation Tippett's going to have with Smith prior to the game, and
Mike,
that'll be a decision.
Mike,
I don't think there's any conversation at all. I don't think we're in a 1A, 1B situation this season now.
No, we're not in a 1A, 1B, but you got to pretend like.
Yeah, you've got a starter and you've got a backup, and the only way I see Mike Smith losing his net is if he gets blown
This
up.
is not a losing your net scenario. This is a back-to-back on a 39-year-old guy, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
It's either
in playoff
he gets
hockey.
yeah, he either gets blown out or he gets injured. That's the only way he's losing the net.
Yeah, and honestly, how much time off has Smith had the last 7 to 10 days? I mean, he didn't dress last Monday's game against the Habs. He played in one game, and then he didn't dress again on Saturday. So really, like, he's had a lot of time off. I think that playing back-to-back nights once won't kill him. I think that he'll be able to overcome that. He's shown this year that he's been able to play a large amount of games for an older goalie. I just don't think that would be a huge
my money would be on Smith going back to back.
Yeah,
but it depends so much on what the other games prior were like, and as I said, I doubt very much. I think Tippett would be leaning one way, but I doubt very much he's made that decision or will make that decision until game day.
And do you think that there's any chance we would see Stalock in the playoffs if something were to happen to Smith, or is that just an emergency situation only?
Is he still on how's the taxi squad working for playoffs? Is it?
Well, there's no salary. There's no salary cap in the playoffs, so you can
do
anything you want with your lineup.
You are bringing back flashbacks of Ty Conklin, and it's really scaring me.
Ty Conklin, who played 1.5 periods, and then UC Markkinen
too much.
the rest of the way. You know what though? When UC Markkinen came in to start Game 2 of the 2006 Stanley Cup Final, he had not started a game in over 3 months, and even though the Oilers didn't win that series,
he was incredible.
Markkinen helped push the Oilers to Game 7.
Yeah.
So he didn't have a long NHL career, but I'll give him that. He was in a tough situation. He did the best he could.
Yeah, no, he was great, honestly.
I still wonder though. I truly believe if Rolison's healthy, the Oilers win that series.
Well, the Oilers don't lose Game 1.
No, they had a 3-0 lead to lose 5-4. Ugh. It's a frustrating one. We want to stay positive on this podcast, going into this playoff series, so we won't go down that road. And just to wrap up, final thing, guys, since we all picked the Oilers to beat the Jets, the last question tonight, how far do you think the Oilers are going to go this year? Michael, give me your prediction. How long are the Oilers going to go on a playoff run for?
Oh, geez. All right. This is all fan in me. I think they're going they're going all the way. Whether they win, I'm not going to put that on them, but
Stanley Cup final.
Yeah, Stanley Cup final. It's all on record right now. So when they make it there,
Bold
I'm going to
take.
be playing this on loop for all you guys.
And Mike, how deep of a run do you envision Edmonton going on in 2021?
That's a hard act to follow, honestly. But I think we come out of the North and we go to the United States, and once we're there, all bets are off.
Yeah, I think that they'll get by the Jets for sure. Toronto might be a 7-game series, but it's going to be really close either way. I'll pick Edmonton, but that's probably, I think, as far as they're going to take it this year. There's some really good teams that they could run into in the Final Four, and even if they did get to the Stanley Cup semifinal, that's a huge step in the right direction for this organization, and I think a very impressive growth year. And this team will be even better next year than they are this year. So if they can get that far, that's a real good building block to have, and hopefully go on an even deeper run and get closer to contending for Stanley Cups in the near future. So then we'll just wrap it up. Any final thoughts? Any things you guys are looking for going into this series?
I'm just excited for Oilers playoff hockey, like legitimate playoffs, not some play-in round where we're coming off a good streak, and there's no excuses for these guys now, right? Starts on Wednesday, and you can't say you had a long time off, or you don't have the personnel, or you don't have the goaltending, or you don't have the defense. All bets are off now. They gotta go out there and play their game. I'm just excited to see this team with an actual team now that can get out there and maybe do some damage.
And Mike will give you the final word.
Yeah. At the start of the season, a lot of worry, a lot of concern, with Oscar Klefbom not being a part of the lineup. I think this team has done an amazing job of shoring up its defense, and I think that's going to pay dividends starting Wednesday. I think last year, was a best of 5 play in to get to a shot at the dance. They're in the dance now, and so I'm thrilled that Wednesday night it all gets going, and I'm gonna be like a player, hard to sleep and all that, and excited for Wednesday to get going. I wish we could be in the building, but hopefully the players can feel that we're right there with them, and want the best for them, and excited to see some guys that this is going to be their first playoff action. Guys like Puljujärvi, guys like Caleb Jones, Ethan Bear, those kind of guys, getting some real playoff taste, and hopefully it's a long, fruitful run here. And who knows, in 06 we came in as Cinderella and almost went home with the glass slipper. So maybe it's time we do that now.
I would love that. And can you imagine if Edmonton and Carolina met in the Stanley Cup final again 15 years later?
Oh, that would be, I did have that in a bracket, and then I changed it.
Did you?
And then I changed it, yeah.
A shot at redemption would be amazing.
Are we going to talk about who's going to win the Vancouver-Calgary series at all?
Yeah. The Lottery Cup? Yeah, I think we'll leave those non-playoff teams out of this episode of the podcast.
Well, and before we go, one last thing: get out there and vote for me for Ultimate MVP.
Yes.
Go to upperdeck.com/mymvp, and you smash my mug on the webpage there, and you'll find the tweet that you need to like and reshare and do all of those things. Right now, I'm still sitting a little bit in first place, but not by much. There's that guy from Nashville who's keeps sticking around. The guy with the wrestling cap on. So George the Rock gave me a retweet today. So
that's great.
That's a bonus.
Nice. Gotta love Big George stepping
Yeah.
up for you, who is also, I know you guys did a podcast with him about a year ago, which I really enjoyed. I'm sure most people already do follow you, but just let them know where they can.
Easy for me, at Oilerslive, all one word.
And Mike, where can they follow you?
On the old twitters.com at Mike Dirsa, just my name.
All right, guys. Well, it's been great talking hockey with you, and soon we'll be watching some Oilers hockey and hopefully have more wins to talk about in the days and weeks to come.
Awesome.
All right. So for Michael Hebert and Mike Dirsa, I'm Eric Friesen. This has been the 99 Forever podcast. We're out.